She scanned across the aisle one row back, 10B, to her 17-year-old son. Zeke was in the brace position, his legs together, leaning as far down as he could, forehead to his knees, with his fingers locked on top of his head. The man next to him had his head against the seat before him, clutching the top. Was Zeke scared? More than anything, Kit wanted to call to him, tell him she loved him. But she feared him moving, changing his position. He needed to be that way, just in case that worked. In her mind, she told him how she felt. In her mind, she held his hand. Her older brother Regis was 2 rows behind her in a middle seat. His eyes were closed. He wasn't putting his head down. Somehow, as if he sensed Kit was looking at him, he opened his eyes, gave her that reassuring big brother look before finally lowering his head down. Grab your ankles. Brace. Mark, her youngest brother. Where was he? He was nearer to the back. Kit had to see. She had to look. She had to know. She rose slightly to a near-standing position and searched. She didn't see him. However, she did see the woman in the red sweater. Mark was seated next to her. He, too, had to be in position. Knowing somehow everyone was all right, Kit sat down. It was at that second her heart raced. This was it. Brace. Brace. The one pure, sad thought Kit had was, my poor mother. Her mother was a strong woman. Alone, she raised her kids. Her children were her life, her driving force. How was her mother going to deal with not only the loss of 3 of her 4 children, but her grandson as well? Jilly, Kit's oldest daughter, barely over the legal drinking age, Jilly stayed behind. She had just gotten married and was expecting her first child. At least her mother had Jilly. Kit sat back down, then buckled her belt. She closed her eyes, pressed her head back against the seat, and inhaled, feeling the plane going at a smooth angle downward. Get down! The man yelled. Kit opened her eyes and looked over the empty seat between them to the man next to her. He leaned partially forward and looked at her. Get down! Kit just stared. He extended his arm, cupped the back of her head, and shoved her down and forward. It was abrasive, and her forehead skinned against the plastic of the folded upright tray table. Before she could react, jump back. Impact. The first hit sent a jolt up her backside to her hips. The top of Kit's head hit hard into the seat in front of her, and her own seat slammed down and folded on her back. She felt folded in half, barely able to move. Her arms dangled down, and she wanted to bring them up, but couldn't. A loud ringing commenced in her ears, and they filled with the pressure of the fast-moving and out-of-control plane against the ground. Another bang and jolt lifted her up some, but her belt and the back of her own seat restrained her. She turned her head, looking to her left as the plane swerved viciously left to right. Some passengers were no longer in a crash position. Their bodies bounced out of control with each joggle of the aircraft. Luggage flew about the cabin. A blue laptop case sailed end over end at a high speed, slamming into the man in 9C. Blood splattered, and he rolled from his seat into the aisle. Then, as if he were a rubber ball, bounced upward to the ceiling. Debris flew everywhere. Screams lessened and were more sporadic. There were no more jolts, no more bangs. Just a fast-sailing fuselage, sliding against the ground with no means to stop. With each foot the plane moved, Kit felt the pressure pushing her, but more so the compression, as if her body would eventually smash like a bug. The plane came to an abrupt stop. The seat against her back, the one keeping her down, lifted, and Kit flew to her right, cracking her head against the window. It wasn't enough to render her unconscious. She wished it was. Although the adrenaline aided in her not feeling any pain, it didn't stop the fact that she couldn't breathe when a thick dust or smoke poured into the plane. Kit choked and coughed, and then, for a brief moment, Kit died.